Major funding for Earth Revealed was provided by the Annenberg CPB project. This is San Francisco, the city by the bay, an alluring location not only to the 800,000 who live here, but to millions of others who have ridden cable cars up and down its hilly streets, crossed over its spectacular bridges, and been charmed by its unique combination of enticing qualities. Apart from its many other attributes, the San Francisco Bay Area boasts two Major League Baseball teams, the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland Athletics. Late on the afternoon of October 17, 1989, the Giants and the A's prepare to do battle in the third game of their crosstown World Series matchup. Some 90 kilometers to the south, another battle is about to be played out by two underground titans known as the North American and the Pacific Plates. A section of the San Andreas Fault that marks the boundary between these tectonic plates has been locked in a kind of stalemated tug of war since 1906. In a matter of moments, that great standoff will come to an abrupt end, in the process reducing America's favorite pastime to little more than a trifling footnote. But for the thousands of fans packed into Candlestick Park on this October afternoon, and for the millions watching the Fall Classic at home on television, there's no indication of any imminent danger. Until 4 minutes after 5 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. In large part because of the World Series, television crews blanket the entire San Francisco region, and only minutes after a powerful earthquake has ripped through the Bay Area, the first images of horror begin to emerge. In the frantic minutes that follow the quake, few geologic details are known. What is rapidly becoming clear, however, is that a disaster of enormous proportions has occurred.
Go home! We've had serious problems, obviously. Go home and secure your residence. Shut off the gas, shut off electricity, store water, prepare for aftershocks, prepare for 3 days of no services. You got 90 minutes of light left. You better make use of your time.
As fire and paramedic units rush to provide assistance to quake victims, scientists at the United States Geological Survey in Menlo Park, California, hastily convene to begin analyzing the quake, as well as to dispense information to the media and the general public.
Yes, you can.
So we're just asking for 2 lines because you aren't...
The quake's magnitude is pegged at 7.1 on the Richter scale, meaning this has been a powerful earthquake, capable of causing serious damage to both people and property. Most of the world's attention remains focused on damage in and around San Francisco, such as here on the Nimitz Freeway, where it is feared that scores of motorists have died. And here in the posh Marina district, where prized real estate has been twisted into grotesque shapes. But apart from select localized areas that have been severely damaged, most of San Francisco has come through the quake in relatively good condition. There are problems, of course. Delays in both transportation and communication are widespread, but the city is still functioning. Unfortunately, the situation some distance to the south is less encouraging. The quake's epicenter is located near a peak in the Santa Cruz Mountains called Loma Prieta. And it is communities closest to Loma Prieta like Santa Cruz, Watsonville, and Los Gatos that have actually been hit the hardest.
This right here is the front porch. There is the house down the hill, or what's left of it, shall we say.
Harry and I were in the dining room, each of us tending to our little chores there, phoning, and when we felt it, so we knew right away to go to the doorway, the traditional earthquake movement, and wait for it to subside. Well, it didn't, and then we continued on down the hallway to the front door behind me, and we were thrown to the floor, and ended up on the floor, flying in another doorway when it finally stopped.
Only one person was in the house, and that was one of my tenants. She was up in that little alcove up there, that nook where the two windows are. And her roommate had just come down here to unload something from the car when it hit, and she could look up and see her roommate, you know, just kind of swaying with the house, and meanwhile the porch is falling down, and the house slipped off the foundation, and she's screaming, and it was horrifying.
Within minutes after the quake hits, relief efforts are underway. The official relief apparatus includes various groups and agencies from all levels of government. Their immediate goal is to provide assistance, especially food, shelter, and medical attention wherever it is needed. In the face of tremendous devastation, local, state, and federal officials respond as quickly as they can. Still, there is a sense of frustration shared by nearly everyone associated with the relief operation.
You know, you'd like to go in there and feel like you can, you know, move the concrete, get the vehicles out, do what you can in your rescue efforts anyway, but if you look at the structure and see the magnitude of the problem, you sit back for a moment and you got to realize that it's not going to be resolved immediately.
While the official response is well coordinated, there's clearly too much damage for public agencies alone to adequately address. Fortunately, as often happens in the face of natural disaster, there is an outpouring of support from private citizens. Relief organizations like the Red Cross help galvanize this sentiment into action. And a strong volunteer effort stretching from Santa Cruz to San Francisco quickly takes shape.
The young people were just wonderful, how they helped us. People we never knew, and they never knew us, but they carried us in their arms down the stairs, and they didn't leave us one minute.
As relief efforts continue, geologists comb the surface area around Loma Prieta, collecting data which will help them better understand this earthquake. Ironically, the efficiency of the repair crews poses something of a threat to the work of investigating geologists.
The cities and counties and state governments are very efficient at fixing things. So, for example, damage to roads and other structures are fixed very quickly so that you lose a lot of the data if you don't get out there and record it as soon as possible.
Another major obstacle facing the teams of investigators is weather. Both wind and rain can wipe out vital evidence following earthquakes. Apart from weather and prompt repair operations, the U.S. Geological Survey is forced to deal with one additional problem: damage to its own facilities.
Loma Prieta disrupted our network operations for several hours here in the office. We lost power, as did most of the community, for about 6 hours. We have emergency generators, and we were able to run our essential computers and the tape recorders on those generators. Many computers that weren't powered by the emergency power were down, and many functions that we wanted to perform were impossible.
But despite some problems with its equipment, the USGS continues to operate effectively.
For example, the steps that had been taken to ensure that the seismic monitoring network stayed alive worked well. We really did not lose any downtime from the earthquake, and we were able to essentially provide continuous information to the public and to local and state officials about what was happening during the earthquake.
Really, the most important information to relay to the public after an earthquake is the fact that aftershocks are expected to occur, and the question of how long we expect them to occur, and what kind of additional hazard they represent. During the Loma Prieta earthquake sequence, we were able to speak to the public every day, reminding everyone that aftershocks are likely to occur, and that although we can't predict the time of the aftershocks, the first week or two is the most dangerous time, and aftershocks can continue for several months after the main shock.
As research efforts continue, geologists begin to recognize that there are a number of surprising aspects to this quake.
This looks more like a left lateral.
Yeah, if you put this back. One of the interesting things about the Loma Prieta earthquake was that the fault that broke was not the vertical strike-slip fault that we tend to think of as characterizing the San Andreas Fault.
Geologists normally expect the two sides of the San Andreas Fault to slip past each other horizontally, with the west side moving to the northwest. This did in fact happen, but the west side also moved vertically, riding up on the east side between 1 and 2 meters. What also catches the attention of geologists is that the focus of the quake occurred 18 kilometers beneath the surface, surprisingly deep for California earthquakes. Perhaps because the quake was so deep-seated, no rupture broke the surface along the fault, but numerous fissures resulted from landslides triggered by the shaking. The earthquake was also surprisingly brief, given its great power, with shaking felt for only about 8 seconds. The extent of the damage in parts of San Francisco and Oakland, a full 90 kilometers from the epicenter, also surprises most people. And yet the event itself was hardly a surprise. Earthquakes along the San Andreas Fault have no doubt occurred throughout its 30-million-year history. Whenever the plates on either side of the fault lock and strain against one another, a breaking point is eventually reached. And as the plates lurch past one another, an earthquake occurs. But there's another reason why this particular quake was not unexpected. Scientists have known for several years that the 1,200-kilometer-long San Andreas Fault is actually composed of individual discrete segments. Geophysicists have calculated the probability of major earthquakes in each of these regions, along with the maximum likely magnitude at each location. The Loma Prieta earthquake occurred along one of the 6 fault segments considered most likely to sustain a magnitude 6.5 or larger event within the 30-year interval between 1988 and 2018. Once the shaking stopped, many people almost felt a sense of relief, assuming that they would no longer have to worry about another major earthquake during the foreseeable future. However, the Loma Prieta earthquake was not the so-called big one that geologists and millions of Californians had been waiting for.
We know that there will be future large earthquakes in the Bay Area, probably within the next few decades. And they're much likely to be closer to the centers of population and to shake those centers of population more strongly than Loma Prieta, and actually the strong shaking should last longer.
As terrifying as this tremor was, geologists call it a moderate rather than a great earthquake. The magnitude of the 1906 quake, which also shook the San Francisco Bay region, has been estimated at 8.3, meaning it released about 60 times more energy than the Loma Prieta quake. Nonetheless, there is a chilling irony that links the two events. When California staged an international exposition in 1915, the city of San Francisco wanted to divert world attention from the devastating quake that had rocked the area 9 years earlier. In so doing, it hoped to market itself as a viable Pacific port. This led to the building of exposition structures in the Marina District. The materials selected to fill in the shallow water of the marina were a combination of rubble from the 1906 quake and uncompacted mud and sand. 74 years later, this community, built atop the rubble of one earthquake, would suffer catastrophe from another.
Those very soft surface deposits shook very violently, and in fact they failed. You had what we call a liquefaction, where the ground essentially loses the ability to support loads, and so that buildings that are sitting on that material sunk into the ground and shifted. The foundations of the building shifted.
And the reason for that is because as the earthquake wave moved away from the epicenter, when it hit this geology, this loose, unconsolidated soil, the ground motion actually was amplified or increased 5 times what it was maybe a mile up on solid bedrock up here. So geologists have understood in the last 10 years where to build. Not only how to build, but where to build. And geology, we have maps showing where areas of loosely consolidated ground, and this is one of them here. And if we look all around the edge of the San Francisco Bay, downtown the Embarcadero Freeway, south of Market, these are small packets of liquefiable soils, and these are where we have the most documented damage in the entire San Francisco area.
The fact that geologists and many public officials have known for some time which areas are most vulnerable to earthquakes is of little comfort to those whose lives have been devastated by this disaster. But as the focus shifts from the horror of Loma Prieta to the inevitability of future quakes, the race to increase our knowledge and somehow prepare for these seismic giants intensifies. The approach that generally attracts the most attention and yet continues to be the most elusive is earthquake prediction.
It occurs to me that we saw some interesting creep at Middle Mountain.
Scientists are studying everything from magnetic fields to groundwater levels and deformation of the Earth's crust in an effort to come up with a formula that can accurately predict earthquakes. While some promising work has been done, a definite earthquake prediction technique has yet to be developed. The Loma Prieta quake, however, has contributed what may be an important clue to the prediction riddle. At Stanford University, physicist Anthony Fraser Smith studies low-frequency electromagnetic waves.
And everything will be very solid. Right, and
In part to avoid extraneous signals from the San Francisco area, Fraser Smith looked south to the Santa Cruz Mountains to find a suitable location in which to place his research equipment.
This should be very solid.
What he didn't realize was that the spot he chose would turn out to be almost directly at the epicenter of the Loma Prieta earthquake.
Our first thought after the Loma Prieta earthquake was that we probably would never see our equipment again because there was a lot of damage all in that area. Power had been lost, communication had been lost, the telephone lines were down. We just didn't know what had happened down there.
Remarkably, Fraser Smith's equipment survived intact. And when one of his colleagues checked out the data that had been recorded just prior to the quake, he found something unexpected and quite extraordinary.
There were very big signals coming through, and the thing that most excited him was a big increase about 3 hours before the earthquake, where the signals had grown so large that the computer that runs our system was putting out warning messages saying that the signals were now so large that we no longer could trust the data. They were not, the measurements were actually smaller than the real signals were. They were no longer capable of following the real signals.
What is intriguing about these fluctuations in the electromagnetic signals is that they may have been related to the Loma Prieta earthquake. Fraser Smith is quick to point out, however, that it's too early to claim that they can definitely be considered earthquake precursors. While it's uncertain whether Fraser Smith's research will lead to an effective method of earthquake prediction, there's no doubt that something needs to be done to minimize the level of destruction that large quakes cause. Of particular concern are earthquakes that occur along faults situated close to major population centers. For example, the Hayward Fault, which lies just east of San Francisco Bay. If an earthquake of the same magnitude as the Loma Prieta quake were to occur on the Hayward Fault, a population 15 times larger would be at risk. Engineers at the University of California at Berkeley contend that rapid, unchecked growth in such areas reflects a dangerous lack of planning.
The Hayward Fault ran exactly along, well, the freeway, the Warren Freeway ran along the fault. And then there are most of the hospitals are along there. There is a Navy hospital and many schools are there. This is what I mean, the lack of a disaster prevention policy. These buildings should not be built there. These highways should not be built.
And yet hospitals, schools, and highways have been built in the vicinity of dangerous faults. Clearly, the prospect of tearing these structures down and relocating the millions of people who utilize them is not feasible. The most practical alternative seems to be retrofitting existing structures so that they will be more likely to survive a major earthquake. Most casualties associated with earthquakes are caused not by the quakes themselves, but by the failure of buildings, bridges, and other structures.
This is one of the most serious problems. The problem what to do with buildings or structure that we know that are building on soil that will suffer damage. At the moment, anything that we will do there will be very expensive. It's a very expensive operation. Can be done, however, will require a tremendous economic effort.
There is yet another strategy for minimizing the impact of earthquakes. A seismic early warning system, still in the experimental stage, that was installed following the Loma Prieta earthquake. With this system, the instant a large earthquake is recorded, sensors in the ground transmit a signal to receiving stations throughout the area.
You're taking advantage of the idea that once an earthquake occurs and it's detected, you can essentially outrace the seismic waves that are propagating through the ground by sending a radio signal ahead. And so the farther away you are, the more time of warning that you have.
The actual time saved by such a system might only amount to 10 or 20 seconds, but this could be long enough to divert or temporarily immobilize public transportation systems, or to simply warn people to take cover and possibly save their lives.
So I think it has some possibilities, and the state and local officials are evaluating how such a system might best be used in future earthquakes.
For the residents of the San Francisco Bay region, the impact of the Loma Prieta earthquake was enormous. 63 people lost their lives, and another 3,800 were injured. More than 28,000 homes and businesses were damaged, and the overall financial cost was about $6 billion. Still, the results were far less catastrophic than they might have been. Had the World Series not been in progress, more people would probably have been on the Nimitz Freeway when it collapsed. And if the quake had occurred closer to a densely populated area, the death toll could have been in the thousands.
While earthquake prediction may never become a practical tool, we can use what we know about earthquakes to limit their impact on our lives. For example, we can avoid building in areas where the ground will rupture or subside during a quake, and in areas where liquefaction is likely to occur. We can design new buildings and homes to withstand the shaking of earthquakes. Old buildings can be reinforced or torn down. The contents of all structures should be secured to avoid the injuries caused by toppling furniture and falling objects. We can also prepare for earthquakes by storing emergency supplies at home, in our cars, and at work, and by arranging for earthquake plans with our friends, our families, and coworkers. And finally, we can require our elected representatives to create a comprehensive earthquake policy to strengthen building codes and public structures. Such a policy would employ the best current technology to ensure that highways, bridges, and dams are able to withstand the earthquakes that we know will come. We understand why earthquakes happen. We can sometimes forecast the general location of the epicenter, the intensity of the shaking, and even where the earth will rupture and subside. But knowledge alone isn't enough. We must have the collective will to apply this knowledge and to finance the changes we know must be made. Only then can we make our world, if not earthquake-proof, at least relatively earthquake-safe.
Major funding for Earth Revealed was provided by the Annenberg CPB project.